Hello and welcome into another episode of Offensively Accurate, brought to you by your host, Atlas Thug, aka White Boy Deep Voice. I'm kind of out of sorts for today. I don't know if anybody has followed who will be watching this currently, but huge personal issue with my family. I'm not going to give out any details. Just I'm even struggling for words right now, and I've thought about this for the past 30, 40 minutes of what I was going to even start off with. Just know that I'm dealing with something extremely close to home, personal, with family. So, I mean, the one thing I need to say with this, too, is be ready for me to be gone for a couple of days. I might have to take a week off, depending on how the situation breaks down. I'm just not sure what's to come. Very little information to go around, really, truly. But I'm not going to give out details. It's too very close to home, personal with my family. So with that being said, I ask as humbly as I can. Please pray for my little brother. There's very little I know my parents can do right now at this time. I also ask that you also please pray for my parents as well. Pray for their mental well-being. And I think I'm just going to leave it at that. But again, just so you're aware, and everyone's aware, the audience is aware, I may have to take time away, just based on how long this may play out. I'm not sure. And, I'm kind of sitting, essentially kind of nervously waiting to get a call or text from someone in my family to my phone to let me know, what the next step is, where we go from here. So with that being said, we'll start getting into the news. But again, if you could, please say a prayer for my little brother and my family. But again, moving on to the news, kind of shake myself off and be normal for the show and get this going. One thing I do want to say is, like I said on the last couple of episodes, we are looking to building a streaming content house. Now that'll be between me, so myself, Nick, who's been on the podcast at the beginning of the series on Offensively Accurate, as well as Roman. Roman, you're less familiar with. He's not been on this podcast yet, but two of my groomsmen who were with me at my wedding, not too long ago. We are planning on building a streaming content house. We're throwing together a bunch of ideas. I know I broached one earlier, which was like a Dungeons and Dragons, kind of like a nerdy session, but kind of like how Critical Role does theirs. Moist Critical also did a similar project as well like that. But just know, like, we're pretty nerdy, and it'll be like secondary content to what you see here on Offensively Accurate. A lot less politics involved, that's for sure. And so with that, subscribe to me on YouTube, follow me on X, follow on TikTok, follow on Spotify, and share the show if you enjoy it. Let's get started. You probably saw the title. The title is very simple: Ban Porn and Culture War Moments. I'm going to be spending most of the time today between these two topics, but I'll have a few smaller things to start with before we go right into the porn. But it's similar because we're going to talk about Christian ethics. So let me put this on screen here. I quoted Philibonti on Twitter. I believe this was yesterday at some point earlier in the morning. Now I'll scroll up so you can see this, see what his tweet is. Now he says, "This is dumb because it's the other side of the same coin." But what is he referring to? Well, he's referring to this report from CNN, which is that there are Louisiana schools are now required by law to display the 10 Commandments in all of their public classrooms, from kindergarten all the way up to the universities. Now with this, though, it's not a direct banning of the pride flag and not one for the other. It's essentially making it that it's just now mandatory that this must be flown. I think it's still allowed to, you can have the pride flag. They'll probably take the pride flag and cover it up, to be quite honest with you. But it's a nice white pill to move into the right direction, right? It is a shot heard around Louisiana, I guess you could say, that they are putting Christian ethics back into the classroom, which I think is a good thing. However, though, Philibonti says this is dumb because it's the other side of the same coin. Now, what I say to Philibonti right off the rip is libertarians are dead weight in the American First Movement. And I believe that wholeheartedly. And I, for some reason, have this unique ability for even an account as small as mine to trigger these like bigger accounts. And I always say this, I always punch up. I will always be the person who punches up. I'm just like that. I don't really find any enjoyment from a small account who's like screaming and ringing at me in the comments. But when I get these big accounts that make these ridiculous takes, I just like, I go at them, dude. I'm not scared of, of, oh my gosh, all that remains later, whatever. It's like, I don't care. Like, stop pushing these, garbage dog water ideas. No, he responds to me saying, "They're not enough of you to win on your own," which I respond, in the short term, yes. Because again, as I've said repeatedly, we are generations away from removing the filth, the scum, the degeneracy that has overtaken our culture. It's a generational project. It is literally the definition of planting seeds for trees in which you will never sit beneath. It is looking forward and seeing this is going to take 100, 200 years to be able to build out a culture that is incentivized by a Christian ethic framework and doing good in the name of that, versus one that is incentivized by selfish, like me, oh, it's me time, luxury, convenience. And it's going to take a while. It's going to take time, but I think we're already at the apex point where this culture is very, very malleable, and it's ready to be moved in any direction, because I think at the base level, whatever person could say any name, insert X for whatever problem, people at the baseline are just tired of it. Now, they might not be able to exemplify what it is, but understand that they are at a base level. Most people, regardless of their politics, are tired of it, because we are all struggling in some way. So I say that to be the shape in which the culture can move from here forward. I mean, probably in the last year or so, moving forward, is very ready to take on a new form, because I think people at large are just ready for things to change. Because let's be honest. I mean, even on the economic side, and that's very, non-political. Most people feel that at the gas pump or at the grocery stores. They are tired of it. They're tired of the endless wars. Now, these are kind of surface level when it comes to these ideas, but people can still simply understand the fact that prices go up here, make my life hard, watch bombs on news in other random countries. Like, it's not a very hard jump to make for people to be like, hey, can we stop doing these multi-million-dollar projects over here and help me feed my kids? Now, the other thing I will say to this too is he doesn't even go at the argument I put forward, which was that libertarians essentially do not belong in the American First Movement, and in fact subvert it, which is the point of me saying they're dead weight. They drag the American First Movement, because it's like they are only on the right, or only they're only allies with people who are right-leaning or conservative by proxy of the fact that they just don't want to be associated with the progressive lefts. And a little bit more than that too, right? It's a bit more than just not wanting to be associated with. It's that they also can deem the progressive ideas and the ones being put forward when it comes to things such as child mutilation and other aspects that have gone way over the line. They see that and they go, hey, this is not where we want to be. And I got a comment in here from Wayne Harris saying, something has to change. It would be nice to enjoy this country again. 100%. And I think that's the average person without any kind of political know-how feels, is exactly what Wayne's saying here. Now I can kind of change the comment here, make it easier to see. But it's exactly right. But the point here too is the fact that the libertarian experiment has failed. We are at the apex point of the libertarian experiment, the do what thou will, right? We have seen what has happened when people are allowed to their own tools and assets, right? What they will do. And what started with was just baking a cake turned into what we see now today. The slippery slope is definitionally and definitively a real thing. Despite all of the language that was purveying against it, saying, no, that's not real, we just want to be married. And now here we are being like, hey, we just want to show your kids drag queens in a public library while we teach them about sexual innuendos and fellatio at the age of 7 or 8 years old. It's gone much too far. But again, these things also are difficult to get a good grip of and encapsulate in the mind, and understanding why they would take this place inevitably over a long enough period without having the Christian ethic or framework to back it up. And obviously that is because it comes with the understanding that people at the root are bad, which is very, very different and opposing to the default liberal stance, which is, well, people are good, right? And it's like, no, dude, they're not. We don't operate this way. That's not how That's not how God made us. That's not how we are as humans built. And so, but I say this to make the point here, which is that he knows this is true. But his point here is that there's not enough of us to win. And so understanding that too, he's correct in fact that if you want things to change, you have to have enough relevancy in the electorate to make things change. Because if you have no power, what can you truly influence? So in that, I say, yes, he's correct. So I say right there in the short term, yes, you are right in this. But the point of what I'm saying is not because I'm in a win now sense. I'm just saying if we wish to win and get a much more with clarity view of what the American First Movement should be, we have to begin excising these libertarians who refuse to honor, or I guess at least nod or acknowledge the fact that the Christian framework is the way that these things are supposed to be. And especially too, because most right-leaning libertarians will say that they believe in God in some deist kind of sense, where it's just like they understand that, yeah, there's something greater than me, but it's not in a specific doctrine. It's just like, I know there's a God up there, but that's like the extent of their relationship. So they can at least nod to the fact that there is some kind of divine command or doctrine that is the foundation for which we draw our morals. Now, I wanted to get a real life example of this. But before I wanted to go to the real life example of what I want to show you, which is between Dave Smith and Andrew Wilson, is a couple points I wanted to make on this specifically, which is, what do I share in common with someone of late age who is well acquainted with the teachings of Christ, but looks at transgender indoctrination as being one and the same? Now, I can understand that if it was a child or someone who was in middle age, but I'm talking specifically about Phil Labonte here, who is a co-host on a political show and has been vocally giving his opinions and being in the pundit sphere or the conservative space for, I think, well over a year now, who is definitely well acquainted with the teachings of people like Herbert Marcuse is one of the top people he brings up. So you know that he is well acquainted, at least on some level, of at least what the basic tenets of Christ are. Is this, my neighbor, someone who can look at the teachings of Christ and then on the same hand look at what the transgender indoctrination is and then say that these are two of one and the same? I don't know how I can consider that person a neighbor. And then it made me think, what truly is a neighbor? Now, I will say this is entirely speculative, and I'm sure there are theologians and pastors who can, whip me completely into shape on what that specifically is, but it always was a thing that drew and caught my attention, which was, why the specific use of the term neighbor? Why did it not say treat everyone as you would treat yourself? It specifically says treat your neighbor as you would treat yourself. Love your neighbor as you would love yourself. I think that implies that for someone to be your neighbor would imply that you actually have a closeness in some form, some kind of relational distinction, whether that's, geographically proximity, or whether it's just purely because like this is a friend, an acknowledged personal relationship friend. And I'm not saying that because I'm like, well, you don't need to treat people like your neighbors if you can call them not your neighbors. I'm just saying, in the framework of, you have to be able to understand who is an enemy and who is a friend, right? It's not like everyone's your friend. That's ridiculous. There's no absolute where everyone is your friend. That's dumb. We know that these things aren't right. It's not real. It's possible that everybody could be your friend, but we know that that's, it's a hypothetical, and it's just simply not real. I only say that because I make the point of which, if they are not my friend, what are they? And to me, that implies, even if they're not an outright oppositional enemy, they at least don't need to be conjoined at the hip with our movement, such as adding libertarians who refuse to, bend the knee to Christ, while also acknowledging that where they get all of their morals and principles and ethics come from Christ. It's like a, you're just dragging your feet kind of deal because you want to do something that's like, that's out of bounds, in the Bible framework. And for a lot of these libertarians, that ends up being doing drugs or smoking weed or, or being alcoholics or doing things, in that kind of decadent light. No, I'm not accusing Phil of these things. I'm just saying that seems to be the boat that he is in and the audience of which he speaks to. But go to the real life example. This is Paleo Chriscon or Christcon, who is Andrew Wilson, who is a blood sports debater. Man, I said that so wrong. He will also be featured in a coming episode where I would like to do a creator spotlight. I'm actually going to continue doing that. I think that's a good recurring series to have, which if you didn't catch the last one, I did one on Ho Math in the previous episode. I'm not going to do every single episode with the creator spotlight. I think I'll maybe do every 3, something along those lines. Andrew Wilson is a blood sports debater. And where does he debate? Most of the time, he debates for Christian populism. Now, I would imagine many more people are going to be familiar with the person on the right, who is Dave Smith, who is the nominee who wasn't, right? It is who everyone in the Libertarian Party points to, who they wish actually would have ran on a ticket. But in Dave Smith's words, it is just something he does not wish to do. He probably finds it to be a bit more comfortable to be on the sidelines where he runs the show, where he runs his comedy. And I think that's important. I think that he's done enough. He's impacted things in the right direction. I think he has a lot of influence. Now, do I think he's 100% correct and 100% right? No, but I think he's definitely been a net positive in peeling back a lot of what we see today. Now, not in terms of degeneracy, but in more terms of outright corruption when it comes to the government. He's a very intelligent person, but again, most comedians here in the last, 10 years, namely Joe Rogan, have been the pushers of the boundary. And so here we are again, finding another one. But if you haven't read this already, I'll go ahead and read what you says on the tweet here, which is Paleo Chriscon, which Andrew Wilson completely dominated Dave Smith, the comedian, in the debate of is libertarianism better than Christian populism? Now, instead of reading the rest of this, I'll just go ahead and play this out. But it is essentially exactly what we just spoke about, which is a libertarian admitting that they nod their head to the fact of we get our morals from divine doctrine, but we don't want to honor all of said values that come with the divine doctrine. Now, it obviously doesn't go exactly how I said it, but you'll understand once I play this, and it's only a minute long. And anyone in the chat, if anything's too loud, too quiet, please let me know. I'll change it accordingly.
Why is it actually wrong for them to do that? You say because it seems like it's against nature, which isn't the natural fallacy. Couldn't I just apply that to homosexuals as well and say, well, it seems like it's against nature?
Yeah, sure. Maybe you could.
And do you think so? Your moral oughts are based around just things that gross you out?
No, divine intervention, bro.
Divine command?
Yeah, there you go.
So if it's divine command, then you're going to abandon libertarianism and you're going to come over to Christian ethics, right?
No.
No. But I thought you made your justification based on divine command.
So, okay, listen, it's clear that
great point, dude. You're right. You have divine command, and you're asking me why it's wrong for a brother to fuck a sister. Listen, dude, I know, I don't know anything about you. I don't know why Jacob thought this was going to be a good idea. I know you dominate 20-year-old OnlyFans sluts in debates.
I also dominate 45-year-old comedians in debates. What's your point?
41.
Now, clearly it looked like they were getting heated, but again, they did for a bit. I did watch this entire debate in its entirety. I think it's literally 3 hours long, but it was a good one. I mean, you're talking about two powerhouses in their own wheelhouses going against each other. You have one who's been a regular guest on the Whatever podcast, who is Mr. Andrew from The Crucible. Fantastic name for a show or a production company, by the way. And then you have Dave Smith, who runs his own stuff, who presents the libertarian, or I guess the best of the Libertarian Party, not the Chase Oliver, kind of crazy version of the Libertarian Party. But right there, there's nowhere for Dave to go with this, right? You can't. How could you possibly sit there and acknowledge that where you get your morals and framework from is from this divine command or divine doctrine, and then immediately go, no, I'm not going to move over there as my framework. It's just it doesn't make any sense, right? I say this again, it's someone's dragging their feet. It is they know what the right answer is, but they're still trying to be well, what about this? I mean, come on, it's not that bad, guys. I mean, are you sure it's really this bad? And a lot of these times it is because the people making these decisions generally are in a group of wheelhouse, or coming at from a singular issue, which for some people it's they want weed to be legalized. That's why they're libertarian. For a lot of them, it's because, it insert one of these X, right? Libertarians could also be for gun rights, insert this value. It's generally singular, which is why when they come together, you end up with a Chase Oliver nominee because they're not agreeing on anything else outside of minor singular issues, which is these things should be decriminalized. So it leaves a lot of range and room for a spectrum of libertarian ideas to exist. Dave Smith still did well on his aspect here later on in the debate because he held his own pretty well. Now, I think if you were to watch this debate fully, and obviously I am biased towards Christian populism, so I definitely think Andrew did well in this debate. I think he honestly moved Dave a bit in the needle of Christian populism, especially when they did going a bit harder into the framework. And he's like, he's demanding Dave. He's like, why do you say this? Why do you say this? And then eventually, when it was less heated, because it was less of like a blood sports debate moment, you were getting a bit more of a relaxed answer and being like, okay, well, maybe it's because I think like this. And I say this because obviously the title item of this episode is ban porn, which is another avenue of which libertarians would fight you on by saying that no, like you shouldn't be able to ban porn, like porn should be free and legal. And again, namely in the name of, well, it's not hurting anybody else. I disagree. I harshly disagree. I think porn is damaging to anyone, even a solo party individual. Now, it might not be directly physical altercation, right? You don't open your phone and turn on Pornhub and you end up with a black eye. Now, I mean, possibly some people might. I don't even want to know how that situation would occur. But it's to make the point that they will, because it's the non-aggression principle, right? The NAP. It is, well, porn doesn't harm anyone, right? It doesn't harm the life of people individually. It's like, any threatening, urgent manner. So it should be allowed. And like, that's the principle most libertarians operate out of, which I think is a false, it is just not even a false principle. It's just a poor principle to operate as the foundation of where all other principles will stem from. Just because someone's not dying in the moment doesn't mean it might not have degenerative qualities to it, which would lead to, corruption or even worse, death down the line, which is what you see a lot of with drugs, pornography, and all of the things that seem to be the reason why people are libertarian. Now, I'm not saying that to make people feel bad about, possibly having vices. Everything, everybody has vices. No, people aren't perfect. It's just to say, if you look at today's age and you look at everything that's going on, I think the party that has the weakest solution to changing the fabric and the social contract of what's going on in America right now is libertarians heralding the do what you should, do what thou will. It's already what's going on. People are already doing whatever they want with reckless abandon. So that's my little take here on this, because I think too it should be known that the libertarians need to actively be converted out of libertarianism. I am a recovering libertarian myself. I held a lot of these views as a child, or I guess as a young adult, more accurately. Moved to the Tea Party. That was like, it's a more of a temporary thing. The Tea Party didn't last very long because it, very quickly became irrelevant, I should say, as the Libertarian Party stayed. But obviously, they're very similar. It's a lot of the same audience, and there's a bunch of overlap in there too. To where I'm sitting now today, which is to the right of literally everything outside of a literal, national socialist. I sit here today as a Christian populist, Christian nationalist, being like, this is the way. This is what I will herald, and this is what I believe is the right thing to institute and push forward as the framework for this country, especially when we are in such a malleable time as we are today. So to move on from there, though, that was a little bit of the libertarian take, and kind of opening it up for the issue of porn. Porn is one of the most damaging, degenerate, poisonous, toxic, slimy, scummy things that exist in today. Now, it's not even just the, porn, quote, porn itself. It's the fact that video game ads, they utilize the sexual appeal. You have the fact of like, we have even in the conservatives doing the calendar gate, right? Using sexual appeal. So even if it's not explicitly labeled porn, right? I think the bigger issue is that it is a hypersexualized society that uses sex appeal at any literal chance or opportunity it can. Now, I know that a lot of the statistics I'm about to get into explicitly define porn as being explicit intercourse or nudity. But I think that that definition needs to extend a bit further, because obviously there are plenty of sexual appeal instances that you and I can think of right now that do not show full nudity or intercourse, but plays on the mind in terms of the same way that porn would. And and a lot of the time you see it on Instagram by doing, by painting on the skin, and doing a lot of different things of that nature, right? But even like in video games, they'll make the ads for it have like the most absurd and animated visuals and jiggle physics known to mankind, all to get the effect of appeasing the little spot in the brain that goes like, I'm horny. I say this because I find it to be one of the biggest scourges of our time. I mean, a lot of people actually deem what we've been going through in the last few years as the porndemic. I think this is a lot of the reason why you see the culture war between the genders blowing up in the way that it has. I think that you have gotten both parties, not just men, not just women, both parties have had expectations, brutalized in some form. They've had them warped, perverted, based on the fact of there's just all of this readily available pornography. Now, I can't explain it as good or as best as some of these like psychologists and doctors we're about to listen to here on video. But what I can say is I do have two eyes and a brain and a belief in God. And I can outright just sit here and say, I can barely log into any social media anymore. I can, it's hard to even kind of scroll on X, even doing streaming, because it's like, I don't know when I'm by chance going to run into an account that's like, that'll just have it in the quotes, and the quote will be, man, I haven't seen a hot woman in days. And my brother, I'm telling you, if you click on that post, it is an absolute, you have immediately opened up a porn catalog. And it's like an engagement trap. It's meant to get all the engagement from a bunch of OnlyFans girls who will go in there and post like a 3-second video of themselves, all for this advertisement. And again, if you remember from the home out video, like we already have school, and a lot of the early life for men is already kind of built in an anti-male way. And then you tie into the fact that too, pornography now and the way that all these things are advertised and appealed to is the same way that I said about how women were biologically pressured on their not pressured biologically on their vulnerabilities. Like for women, it's hypergamy. And for men, it's low impulse control. Now, it's not to say that women don't also struggle with low impulse control, but if you were looking at a graph, men deal with low impulse control at a slightly higher rate than what women do. And with that comes pornography and the thumbnails and all the easily accessible ways they make it for a man to essentially click on a picture of boobs and feel satisfied by it. But let's go to some of the more aggressive statistics we have with this, right? So let's go right here with Rollo Tomassi. Now, Rollo Tomassi I don't agree with entirely, but he is a pretty influential account, and he is, even a broken clock can be right two times a day. I'm not saying he's a broken clock and he's always wrong, and that's the way. I'm not a red pillar, right? I'm a Christ pillar. I'm not going to be the guy who's going to tell you to sit here and adapt to the current iteration. While I do think that you should be pragmatic and adapt, to the technical formats, I don't think the solution to this life as a man is making as much money as humanly possible with no family in sight and trying to literally have sex with as many women as possible. You will end up a broken shell of yourself. And if you don't believe me, I think people need to listen to Dane Blazerian, who's recently come back into the mainstream as a bit more level-headed, as he has been on a tour, I think it happened about a year or two ago, where he essentially said exactly that, where it's not the cool thing to do. And he regrets a lot of the choices that he made and the way that he has been made to feel and how broken he is on the inside in his brain and things that cannot be changed. The neurodivergent pathways that were formed, the sexual deviancy that he has now, built and conditioned himself to be in. Those are very, very hard things to move away from. But to go to this tweet here, almost 90% of OnlyFans users are married. Now he says worry less about porn and ladies, and worry more about why your husband prefers his OnlyFans girlfriend to you. Now, I think that's just scummy. Like, that's not the point we should be making here. The bigger point is, why are 90% of the OnlyFans users married? Why is the main audience for OnlyFans users married individuals? Now, I think you could go a multitude of directions here, right? I think the biggest one, honestly, is there is just a blatant, broken, transactional nature to the way most marriages work with sex. And it's just like, the only way I can honestly really explain it is the fact of, like, for somewhere down the line, most of these marriages end up, or they even started as, where sex is like a woman giving a gift to a man. Not that they're both partaking in something, but that the fact is, like, the woman's gifting or emprising the man with this, rather than it being a conjoined activity that both people partake in, that both people gave and both people received. It's not treated like that. It's treated in a transactional form, as if, like, the guy always has to be doing enough. He has to have done something to have earned it. And that's not how it's supposed to be. And I think what happens, and I think in a lot of these relationships too, is, for one, women are the gatekeepers to sex. So by proxy of them just being the gatekeepers to the access, right? And the average man, obviously, not going to violate their wife to get what they want, let alone most men don't even want that. They're like, why would I want it if I have to force it, right? That's obviously a very simple mindset most men have, most men that are not evil. And it becomes transactional. The woman starts manipulating the man, essentially using it, holding it over his head. Oh yeah, honey, why don't you do the dishes and do this and maybe tonight. And I mean, and I can go, video after video after video and show you online of all these women who are bragging about how many times they just said that they were tired after they promised their husbands they would do these things with them. And it's like, so you have time to make a TikTok video to humiliate and emasculate your husband, but you don't have time to honor your husband or partake in the union with your husband. Stuff like that I really have to like isolate and be like, this isn't all women, right? It's a lot of them, and probably most, but it's not all women. And so it's like, you gotta make sure you categorize things as such, or you will end up being or falling in one of these traps with this, like the incel trap, where you hate all women. And understand me, it is a very easy trap to fall into. It's honestly way too easy for men to fall into this trap. And the fact that conservative women who are supposed to be, allies to men, in fact, also make it harder. They also use their own sex appeal to appeal to simp-like audiences. They also hold soft feminist takes. It makes it so hard. It makes it so hard for men to fight back against all of this stuff. But more of these statistics here with the OnlyFans is saying that the monthly traffic on OnlyFans was 1.06 billion people in February of 2023. In 1 month, 1 billion people went to one website for porn access. And on that website, 1 billion people, obviously, you have to pay a subscription to have access. So this is a paid platform with 1 billion visits in 1 month. Now, it was saying, according to the same source, the number of OnlyFans registered users worldwide reached 187,000. I find that to be a bit low, and I could be reading that wrong, but it says in 2021, so maybe it's a lot more now it is today. Oh, okay, yeah. So in 2021, the amount of users worldwide was about 187,000 people. Today, they had 1 billion visits in 1 month. So clearly, in a matter of like 3 years, less than that even, OnlyFans now has a stranglehold over many, many men. Apparently, global pre-tax profit, don't really care about that. But the average OnlyFans user is 29 years old. Now, I'm not sure if that's different than what the average age of a regular porn user is, but it's still kind of alarming. Also saying the average income of an OnlyFans user is around $42K per year. Obviously, once you get to that big of a number, all of these averages are going to just look like normal averages from a normal population, right? So I think this is more indicative of the fact that everyone is affected by this. It's not like there is a specific demographic being more affected than others, but it definitely is very representative of the natural bell curve. Saying that, there's a 70% chance that the users are white, a 90% chance they're likely to be married, and a 60% chance they're likely to be heterosexual. Now, this one wasn't nearly as important as what these videos were, but just some opening statistics to just show you like how prominent porn is. And this is just one website. Again, this isn't even the most prominent one, right? This is like the paid one. This is like the S tier version of porn, right? Like where you get to like talk to the girl and message her, right? It like has all these extra features. It's so gross. And I'm going to take you to some of these more up-to-date pornography statistics, which is from Covenant Eyes. Now, I will take a second to shout out Covenant Eyes. Covenant Eyes is a product, service, company. It aids with combating porn addiction, whether it's for yourself or it's like a guide to help you help someone else, namely between spouses. And I think there is also a curriculum for parents helping kids. But here are some of these stats. Let me get this over here, actually. Now, this is about the VR porn, but right here, 90% of teens and 96% of young adults are either encouraging, accepting, or neutral when they talk about porn with their friends. So indifferent, right? So, I mean, there could be a big portion of those that are indifferent. I wish they would have separated them, but that all categorically is positions that are not openly oppositional to porn, which shows you it has been normalized. Porn is just another thing of life, right? It's just another thing that exists, right? It's just everyone knows what porn is. Everyone's had their issue with porn, and it shouldn't be this way. It shouldn't even be legal. When we get to this video that's going to talk a bit more about how porn addiction is misunderstood and a bit more about what actually happens to the brain and how degenerative it is, what the damaging aspects are, I'm going to find it possibly and hopefully you, the viewer, will sit there and go, okay, maybe porn is a lot worse than I thought it was. Or maybe you already feel this way. But I think some of the other more ridiculous things here too is look at this one about porn in the church. 1 in 5 youth pastors and 1 in 7 senior pastors use porn on a regular basis and are currently struggling. That's more than 50,000 U.S. church leaders. And at a rate that like this, I would imagine that almost extends itself to the fact that almost every church, you have a high chance of your church having one person in there who's in a leadership position who struggles with porn. I could be wrong on that, but I think that's close to what that's showing. 43% of senior pastors and youth pastors say they have struggled with pornography in the past. That one I can understand. Struggling with pornography in the past isn't saying it's a current addiction. It's saying 64% of Christian men and 15% of Christian women say they only watch porn at least once a month. And only 7% of pastors report that their church has a ministry program for those struggling with porn. Why? Why? We know how effective and dangerous it is. Only 7%? But I would also wager that there are even less pastors who can report that their church has a ministry program for those struggling with obesity, right? Then again, that goes back to a baseline argument of why are churches not attacking the problems that are the most prolific? Why are the priorities to attack non-problems? Why is every church seemingly more concerned with not offending people? Let's go to the videos. Now, this is going to be 2 videos back to back.
If you need to record any...
Let me make sure I can mute this ad. Now, this first one is going to be with Dr. K, Healthy Gamer, who I am completely unfamiliar with. But the title of this video is that porn addiction is misunderstood. How to actually stop. Dr. K, Healthy Gamer. So this is Chris Williamson interviewing Dr. K. I believe it's in a live or a Zoom kind of setup. We're going to go ahead and watch this. And then he also talks to, I believe it's Dr. Andrew Huberman. And the next one's not nearly as long. But they both bring up very, very, very important and urgent issues with porn addiction. I think it's all intriguing, it's all interesting, and it's all well worth a listen. So I'll go ahead and play this. And again, if anyone has any issues with the sound in chat, please let me know. I will change it accordingly. If it's too high, too low, regardless, I will change it.
Porn use amongst young men and how they feel about it?
So I think porn use is one of the most misunderstood things this is just my opinion, okay? From a clinical perspective, from a psychological perspective, from a neuroscience perspective. So we've done a lot of work with pornography usage, pornography addicts. So I think the first thing to understand, a lot of interesting stuff came out from our internal research. We're hopefully going to publish a paper on this within the next year or so, but hasn't really been formulated yet. So the first thing that's really interesting is that people who are addicted to pornography oftentimes get exposed at a very, very young age. We're talking about first exposure to pornography like prepubescent.
And this was another thing that blew my mind too. If you haven't seen it, I read off a large Reddit transcript from a post that talked about how her child, her iPad kid, was shown porn by another 6-year-old in the same classroom. And what that led to was the kid understood that like the moaning sexually is a way to humiliate the parents. And so what the parents said was the kid, anytime he wanted to do something or was in public, he would start moaning because it was one of those things where the parents was like, please stop doing that. And so essentially he found a way to manipulate his own parents by a proxy tool of pornography. It's so degenerate. And 6 years old too. Like, think about that, 6 years old. Now it was shown early to me. I was first exposed to it when I was 11 or 12, and that would have been way back in the early 2010s, right? It's sick. It's very disgusting, dude.
Most of the time. Second thing is that pornography usage has nothing to do with sexual perversion. So a lot of people will think if someone is really, really addicted to pornography, they must be like really horny or like depraved in some way or things like that. Generally speaking, my experience has been that pornography usage is really just a very powerful emotional coping mechanism. So pornography usage will suppress a lot of negative emotions. And if you talk to people who use pornography, especially in an addictive way, what leads to usage is like feeling bad about yourself. And this is the big problem with pornography usage, which is that once you start to use it, it sort of engenders more shame and guilt. And in order to deal with the shame and guilt, you have to use it again, right? And it's just the kind of thing where if you like think about the societal stigma, if someone's like, yeah, like I grew up and I was addicted to alcohol, like, and now I'm sober for 20 years. And it's like, good for you, man. And it's like, yeah, I'm a recovering pornography addict. And it's like, yeah,
it's got like this like taboo nature to it, right? Like you can sit there and be like, hey, I'm 6 months clean of alcohol. People come up to you and be like, oh my gosh, that's so good. That's so great. And, you try to publicly, be like, hey man, like, I'm 6 months clean of having an insane porn addiction. They're going to be like, yeah, I'm good for you, man. Like they're going to still view you as like, kind of like subhuman, right? Because it's still got this taboo nature to it. Even though we just saw the statistics, like everyone's using it and it's normalized. So it builds like this super, super, super negative feedback loop, which he just said about the humiliation and guilt, where it's like it's such a closeted thing. It's so perverted.
You're not going to get the same, if you're dating someone and let's say you have a brother or sister, and they're like, yeah, I'm dating someone who's like been sober for 10 years. Like, cool, right? Like that's probably good, like not bad for your relationship. I'm dating someone who's like been addicted to pornography for 10 years and they're like there's a lot of stigma associated with, a lot of shame associated with it. I think it's really about emotional regulation. This is really interesting. So there's research that shows that, so it really has nothing to do with sex, basically, which is what's weird. I mean, it can have sexual consequences and stuff and create problems in relationships. But there's a research that did a multivariate regression analysis on people addicted to pornography, which means they looked at which variable associates the most with pornography usage. And the number one variable was meaninglessness. So the more meaningless your life is, the more likely you are to be addicted to pornography.
That is just outright depressing. So probably more closely meaningless, right? I think that's probably loosely tied to things like despair and misery. So right there you have it, the what will lead you the most, what has the highest attachment, the highest tag association is the fact that you hate yourself, or that you think that you're worthless, or you don't have a strong relationship with God, right? Or you view yourself in some kind of lens. And to be fair, this also speaks to the fact of the mass, disparticipation among men in everything, in all walks of life, right? With, the dropping out of college like crazy, a lot a lot of, straight men dropping out of the dating market entirely. And so I think it makes sense then that all these things are loosely correlated. And in turn, all of these men who are probably not participating also probably have a high probability to also be strongly addicted to pornography, kind of cutting that loop for them to ever break out of that, to want to develop a natural intimate relationship on their own, instead relying on the rush of shame and guilt that they get from pornography.
And so what we've actually kind of found, which is really interesting, is when you work with people like that, helping them develop like purpose helps them actually, like, you have to have a reason to stop watching pornography. It's got to be like some kind of, you have to go through that withdrawal for some greater good. And so helping people find purpose is like one of the biggest things that apparently helps with pornography.
What do you think it says that porn use doesn't seem to be actually that massive of a sexual trigger? It doesn't seem to be triggered all that much by it's triggered by things outside of sex in a way. It's triggered by life circumstances, meaninglessness.
Yeah. So I think this comes down to the neurochemistry. So if we think about addictions, why do we get addicted to stuff? Because of the effect it has on our brain. And so if we think about from an evolutionary standpoint, there are a couple of different things that will suppress our negative emotions and will also give us like a rush of, like, let's say, euphoric neurotransmitters. So orgasm is one of these things. So why does orgasm feel really good? Because it's required for the procreation of the species, right? So evolutionarily, when orgasm feels really good, we're going to have more sex, and that'll result in the continuation of the human race. The interesting thing is, if you look at actually ancient yogic literature as well, they say that there's this, state of bliss called samadhi, which is sort of the purpose of meditation. And there are a couple of interesting ways that you can get temporary samadhi, and orgasm is one of them. So this also is like one of the reasons that tantric sex is a thing and things like that, which is maybe a conversation for a different day, maybe conversation for today. But I think we've known for a long.
So it's probably akin, the first thing I can think of is like picking a scab, where it's like probably not everybody like does this, right? I mean, not everybody's addicted to porn either. But like, when you're younger, it's like you want to itch your scab, right? And so like, it's like it's gonna hurt, but the end result of like fully peeling that scab off for some reason has this like this euphoric feeling, even though you shouldn't have done what you did. Does that make sense? I think it's playing on the same kind of like neurological pathways. Obviously, porn being a much more complex one, but the first one I can think of was with that benefit analysis was the picking a scab.
Long time. So why is pornography like this? Because orgasm has very specific like activation within the brain. And so now if you kind of think about it, let's say I'm feeling worthless about myself. I'm not doing anything in life. I'm kind of like sitting around, not doing anything. I'm tired of feeling this way. What is a switch I can flick in my brain that lets me forget everything, pushes my negative emotions?
Okay, so this is literally exactly the same. It's got the same exact formulaic pathway as you would if somebody was to like do alcohol, right? Exactly as he said it, right? Like, down on my luck, I'm at home, like I don't care if I spend the last $100 in my wallet, like give me a handle of alcohol, right? Give me a handle of whiskey. And I think somewhere along the lines, instead of that being the tried and true method of what, sad only men do, it became porn. All of these things that he's saying are speaking exactly to that, right? Where this has kind of been the escape model. I'm personally of the belief that this has been done in an attempt to, obviously in a hyper-capitalistic society, it's been hand in hand with the fact that corporations were like, okay, well, we'll sell more beer if we put, nudity on it and sexual appeal versus the one that doesn't. So I think there's a lot of things at play. And I also think that there is a concerted push for these things to be active in the society. And for what reasons and nefarious reasons that may be, I can only be speculative towards that.
Away and actually gives me a spurt of positive neurotransmitters, which I'm not sure exactly what happens when people orgasm in the brain, but and that's why pornography addiction exists. So it's not really about sex.
Shopify Point of Sale
Always
makes
ads.
it easy to start and grow your retail
Always
business.
ads. I'm giving
All backed
somebody
by the
else
world's most
dollar
powerful
bills right
commerce
now.
platform. Whether you're running a
That's so interesting that you have all of these different coping mechanisms, whether it be binge eating, whether it be alcohol, whether it be cannabis, social media, video games, porn. What we've done is increase the variety of ways that you can hide from your feelings.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And pick your flavor of ice cream for today. What is it going to be?
Yeah, right. And there people have drugs of choice, which may be due to some amount of genetic vulnerability. But if you really think about it, I think about pornography addiction is the closest to substance use because of its hard hitting like effect, right? So if you think about getting high, there's discrete like chemicals that enter into your brain and like activate certain receptors. Whereas video games are like a little bit more global, but pornography is really, especially that arousal stuff and stuff like that, is a very targeted way to activate your brain in a particular way. More close.
Yeah, and video games aren't even for everybody either. Like there are some people, like men my age, who like used to play a bunch of video games, right? And then like they just can't do it anymore because it's just not appealing to them. It doesn't hit the same dopamine things. So I think like when he's saying global, it's a bit more video games are more succinct or more susceptible to specific demographics being addicted to them rather than them being like a prominent hard-hitting force for everyone, right? Because even when you go to females, right, that's a huge demographic that like, you know, it could be Red Dead 2, right? But a lot of girls would be like, I don't want to play that, dude. Like, what is this? It's just horses and stuff. And they wouldn't build that same, you know, brain neurotransmitter pathway they would if a typical man would if he was on the same stuff.
Closely resembles a substance.
Downstream from pornography use, have you seen sexual dysfunction? Is this associated?
Absolutely.
So how is it that porn use isn't all that sexual, and yet downstream from porn use, you get sexual dysfunction?
For a couple different reasons. So first, let's understand that sexual means multiple things within one person. So there's a physical aspect to it. There's a neuroscientific aspect to it. There's a psychological aspect to it. So one thing that you tend to see is something that, you know, a term that I coined on stream one day, death grip syndrome, which is if you look at men, especially who masturbate when they use pornography, the physiologic stimulus, for lack of a better term, that men will use actually does not approximate the physiologic stimulus of intercourse. So to put it bluntly, I'm trying to avoid saying this, but, you know, not using lube and using your death grip hand feels different from a vagina. Like that's just how it works.
So you end up developing on just the physicality, on the stimuli in the sense of touch and feel. That's honestly, I think that's indicative of the reason why a lot of men end up being sexually confused and probably leaning towards homosexuality, because, you know, do you expect a woman to be able to grab or to be able to do the same death grip, as he said, as you can yourself, rather than a man? I think that's what they're hitting on here, which is that the neurotransmitter, the pathway, the incentive, the dopamine hit you get when using your hand versus actually partaking in intercourse, you develop a priority towards that dopamine incentive with your hand versus what you get with intercourse. Then put in front of that the fact that the difficulty to reach that, right? The difficulty to get a death grip on your hand in that form, there's zero difficulty. It's essentially just close the door and lock the door, or find a space that you can do it in, right? Where the other one requires that the other person also be in the same mood, that like you also have access to that, right? Or you say if you don't even have a girlfriend, at that point it's like you then have to do X, Y, and Z to even get to a point in which intercourse can even be put on the table. And so I think you lay all those things out with men not participating at whole. We're beginning to see the issue in a bit more of a macro sense here.
And so what happens is the body can acclimatize to this, right? Like that's like literally what happens. So you get used to, you need a particular kind of stimulation. You get conditioned to require a certain kind of stimulation to achieve climax. And so then sometimes what can happen when people engage in sexual intercourse is that they can't get that kind of stimulus to achieve climax.
They've detrained themselves from being stimulated by real physiological interaction with somebody else's body.
Yeah, absolutely. Right.
Unless
so
they also have a very, very strong grip.
Right.
And thus leads to the issues between the spouses, where it's just like, if the husband starts doing this behind the woman's back, these are just hypotheticals. Well, then it would make sense why then he's less keen to even try to achieve having intercourse with his wife. If the fact is true, in the manner in which they're saying it is that dopamine structure is a bigger dopamine hit and more pleasing to him versus what his wife can provide. And essentially too, to be able to, porn essentially detrains you to not enjoy normal sexual intercourse. And that is by itself disturbing. I find it reprehensible, and I think it's the reason why we've seen so much of the sexual degeneracy we see in our culture. I think that's the reason why you have so many divorces and people cheating all the time and affairs. It's just, it's too much stimuli, and we have moved away with pornography, and the normalization of such has now essentially put too many more convenient things on the platter, next to your wife. Right? It's like, here's your wife, but you could also do this, you could also do this, you could also do this. And the more you add to that platter, the more your wife and your family and regular sex becomes like vanilla, and it becomes less appealing, less pleasurable.
So mentally, and so there's interesting things, because I've literally worked with patients where like the process of this is deconditioning. So we'll sort of say like, loose grip, lot of lube. And that'll be frustrating for, I'm serious. I know it's funny, but like seriously, because you have to do that physiological deconditioning, and you have to try to approximate, things like that. And there's all kinds of stuff that you could do with your partner and things like that too. So you can fix this. Sometimes you'll see like erectile dysfunction, just kind of straight up. And then there are also like neuroscience and psychological impacts, right? So sometimes people will have so much shame for pornography that there's, they have difficulty performing. They feel so guilty. There's all kinds of stuff like, does your partner know that you use pornography and things like that? So that can lead to, a difficulty with sort of forming and maintaining erections, which is different from reaching orgasm, right? So there's a whole physiologic chain of things going on. And so we'll definitely see that.
And it just, how sad, right? Like, I couldn't even imagine to be experiencing erectile dysfunction purely because you have watched so much degenerate stimuli that when you have a woman present in front of you, or you're in that moment, you're simply unable to perform because your brain just can't even recognize it anymore, because it's been deteriorated away in your head. You've essentially actively worked to train yourself to be more pleased by the touch of a man's hand than a woman's. Gay. That is gay.
That kind of stuff. And then in some cases, what you also tend to see is that there's this principle called online drift on the internet, where since the goal is emotional engagement, how does a platform keep you emotionally engaged? They do it by serving up more extreme content. So if you look at your platform algorithms, if there's certain things that you search for, it'll serve you like tons of extreme stuff in that way. So if you watch one cute cat video, then you need to see cats doing cuter things to stay on the platform.
It'll be cute cat compilation, and it'll be like a 10-minute video, and then you'll click on that one, then it'll be like cats on ceiling fans, right? It just keeps going. And then namely too, now while we're on the topic of social media platforms, the fact that X itself has outright and explicitly stated that they will be allowing porn on their platform is a grave mistake, man. And especially to think that there's been so many creators who've been like begging Elon to get rid of it on the platform at large, because some of their posts will just get annihilated with spam bots and porn bots and OnlyFans girls going link in bio, is just like, man. And what's funny too is they did this a week after they were like, we're going to make likes private too. And it's like, oh yeah, Elon, like, I wonder why we made likes private a week before we said we're going to allow all pornography on this platform. What a disgusting, degenerate thing. And again, I'll go back to the fact of this is why libertarians need to be moved outside of the America First movement. They're not conservative. They are essentially closeted liberals. And if they're not closeted liberals, they're just feet dragging in the mud conservatives who just refuse to kind of buckle up and man up and move to the more mature position.
And then cats are doing cuter stuff and cuter stuff and cuter stuff. We see this with pornography usage as well, where there's like a gradual like movement towards like hardcore pornography use because you require more stimulus to your eyes and ears and things like that to get that same level of arousal. And if you do that, like, and if you require that really high level of stimulus of just like more, brighter, bigger, whatever, and then if you have sexual relations with a regular human being, like the stimulus is just different.
What's up, Kukla? I appreciate you being here. Sorry for the ads again. I didn't think I had 2 of them in a 13-minute video.
Create the.
But yes, I think this is a very valid discussion. I think if anything, this is one of the discussions of our time, right? It'll be one of those ones where it's a seemingly like, it's a pretty easy give up for a lot of people, but for some people, they will fight tooth and nail to keep pornography around and alive.
Zero gravity acrobatics that you've just seen on porn. Yeah, Mary Harrington calls that the law of fap entropy, which is whatever you start out wanking to will get progressively more intense over time.
Beautiful. Yeah.
It's her second law of pornodynamics, I think, actually. I really like the introduction of the framing in the story that you tell yourself around your porn use is massively contributing to what is going to happen out the other side of it. And I think that, again, what would this be like if it was easier? There is a trend online at the moment that demonizes porn use. And it's because there is a non-zero number of people for whom porn use is destructive and can't control it. That has been used to cover all of porn use as if you're using porn, this makes you susceptible to a whole suite of problems that are going to occur, even if you do have a healthy relationship with it, because there are a whole host of people that are able to use porn and have a healthy relationship with it, and at least not have dysfunction on the other side of it, whether it's healthy or not might be
That just simply is not true. I have no idea what he's talking about. What person can... Again, what's crazy is the guy just laid out all of that. And it's like from the start, you will begin to develop these pathways. And then he sits here and takes this typical libertarian stance. It's what these people who smoke weed would do. When I do it responsibly. Like, come on, bro. It's like you don't have some supernatural ability that can sit there and be, Professor X and then be like, I'm changing my brain pathways so this weed will not affect me. It's like, that's insane. It's ridiculous. But it's this kind of like paper-handed, like, well, some people can do it,
A little bit of a different discussion. But for the people who see their porn use as something which is worthy of shame, which is worthy of guilt, which is worthy of making them feel like less of a man, less of a appropriate partner, I can guarantee that you are somebody who does have a problem with porn use. Porn use is not good for you if that is the story that you tell yourself about your porn use. And it's so recursive and self-reinforcing. It's brutal.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, it's interesting because when people sort of demonize porn use, I think I'm seeing this trend more and more where if I have a problem with something, our society is moving more and more towards that thing needs to go away, as opposed to I need to get better at handling it. And so
yes, shaming tactics, dude. You shame what you definitely want out of society completely, dude. I don't think there's any level of porn where we're going to be like, well, this kind is okay. I mean, obviously, there's different kinds. But I don't think there's any kind of measure that you're going to get Christian conservatives or Christian populists to be like, well, we'll allow this level. It's like, no. All of it.
Really scary cycle that I see is that the more that we remove things, the less tolerant we become. And then smaller and smaller things can set us off.
We'll get back.
And see, I don't even care what Chris Williams got to say here. It's, again, goes back to the fact of these people who are default liberals. And again, I don't know what the actual, politics and positions of these two guys are. Is it defaults to, well, the number one tenet we must hold is tolerance. Like, dude, it is clearly an objective. Imagine laying all of that out there and then being like, well, we should tolerate it. What? How irresponsible, right? How just blatantly irresponsible of that guy. But again, their number one tenet is care and fairness and intolerance. And like, if we're not being tolerant, then like, again, cannot stand the use of that word. The reason why we are even in the position that we are in today is because Christians decided, instead of actually holding up the doctrine of the word of God, they were like, let's just tolerate literally everything. You know, who cares? Let's just tolerate it. Well, here's what happens when you tolerate stuff. And instead of actually using the principle of shaming things you do not wish to normalize, which is what we should be doing. And it's good that he pointed that out. But poor that he said, he kind of pulled back and was like, oh, you know, like, what happens if we're too intolerant? And it's, again, you're making this kind of umbrella argument that jumps away from all of the specifics you just talked about to go back and appeal to people who are like, well, you know, we don't want to be Nazis, man. Like, give me a break, dude. So let's go to the second one here. And the second one picks up on a different aspect that happens with porn, but one that I think is a lot more appealing to men if you were to play this in front of them and be like, really, is this the relationship you want to build with porn? Is this how you want to end up? Because I think that this one is the next level shaming. And I think if this one doesn't get men to stop, I don't know what will. But again, porn addiction is very, very devolved. It happens exactly as they laid it out there, dude. It's not hard to get addicted. It's so normalized. And they also do their best job to make sure it's always readily available in front of weak and miserable men all of the time. And I hate it. But again, it's the reality of the world we live in, dude. They will push these things. Whatever gets more dollars in people's pockets, it's the way the world moves. To move to this next video, though, this is, I think it's Andrew Huberman is his name, if I'm remembering correctly.
Go to motionray.com.
Yes, Andrew Huberman, right? This is another one, right? Same guy from Chris Williamson who's interviewing him. And again, let me get this ad out of the way. But this one's titled, "If You Take a Break from Watching Porn, This Happens." It's from Andrew Huberman, who is also a pretty well-known psychologist. This one's a lot shorter and it's only 4 minutes long. But I think it's imperative that this argument is the forefront, then backed up by all of the other poor incentive pathways you build in your brain. So you'll understand what I'm saying the moment I start playing this, because they go right into it. It's only 4.5 minutes long. But again, any issues with sound, because again, every video might be different, please let me know. I'll adjust accordingly.
There's an additional issue with pornography, which is not often discussed, which is that, remember, guys in particular, the brain is a learning prediction machine. And if, I'm not trying to say that all pornography is bad, but there are good data to support the idea that if your brain learns to be aroused by watching other people have sex, it is not necessarily going to carry over to the ability to get aroused when you're one-on-one with somebody else, right? Especially young kids who are consuming a lot of pornography, the brain is learning sexual arousal to other people having sex.
So you're going to program yourself into being a voyeur?
Or just create challenges in.
So being a cuck, I don't know what a voyeur is. I think I've heard that term loosely, but that's where he's going at, right? Now he is also giving the premise here that it's not a one-for-one, right? Because there are differences between the relationship you build with the digital screen versus one when you're in the moment and then you actually have a lot more endorphins and hormones going around when you're actually in the physical presence of another person in these situations. But I think the point is to be made here is the fact that you are training yourself to be getting to pleasuring yourself by watching a woman that you fancy being done in by someone who's not you. I think that's probably the best way I could say that.
Sexual interactions with with peer, with a real partner. Right?
Mary Harrington has the 3 laws of pornodynamics, and the second law of pornodynamics is the law of FAP entropy, and it says that whatever you start out wanking to will get progressively more intense over time. And I think that this is sort of speaking to that ever sort of escalating amount of the wildness that you need to watch in order to get an ever.
And I think by that law itself too would beg or would imply that even if it's not a one-for-one with a digital relationship with the screen, watching others versus watching someone in person from like the cuck chair or something, I think the entropy aspect of it and the devolvement of it and wanting to do harsher and harsher and more graphic, right? I think that implies that at some point that person will then wish to try it IRL, because that would be in my opinion, would be a logistical step in that process, in that entropy into devolving behavior, until eventually you invite your significant other to partake in the behavior with you.
a decreasing stimulus that comes back.
Yeah, and here I'm approaching this only through the lens of biology, right? I'm not a psychologist, and I'm certainly not political in any way. At least not. I have ideas about politics, but I just don't discuss them publicly. But
that's the most cucked thing I've heard all day. Dude, I have opinions on politics, but I don't say them out loud or publicly. It's like, bro, like, okay, dude, hold all your thoughts and opinions in, dude, and just be a coward the rest of your life. Again, this is a side point.
But the idea here is that, I'm not saying pornography as a stimulus is bad or good. What I'm saying is it, in its availability and its extreme forms, it's a very potent stimulus, and very potent stimuli of any kind, extremely palatable food, extreme pornography, extreme experiences like bungee cord jumping, those set a threshold for dopamine release. And Anna will tell you that, and I'm sure she did, that the higher the dopamine peak, the bigger the drop afterwards. And it's not that you drop to baseline, you drop below baseline.
Can you imagine sitting there and agreeing and being like, yeah, when people do this, it leads them down this path where they get more and more degenerate, and it gets more and more graphic, and it's got these huge waves and crashes of dopamine. But I can't tell you if it's good or not. I can't tell you what my politics are, man. I don't, I'm not going to take a stance on anything. It's like, bro, just fucking speak, dude. Just say what you feel. Why are we so cucked, dude? You're a leading psychologist, bro. Just say what you think. My gosh.
So again, it's not, these things aren't good or bad. They just have to be controlled in a way, because when people are pursuing dopamine peaks over and over and over and they aren't getting them, typically it's because they've been pursuing that activity far too often.
And you're saying perhaps take a break from that, and there may be an ability for yourself, your system to reset.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, in theory, all the things that we're talking about with pornography could be superimposed on.
It's okay, guys. Just take a tea break. Just take a tolerance break for a bit. It's just like coffee, dude. Just wean yourself off, and then you can come back to it, dude. Mind blown, man. This is psychologist.
Could be superimposed onto real sex, right? That one also has to be cautious there, right? But the cycling back and forth between dopamine and low dopamine states, dopamine fasting as it were, but maybe just low dopamine states, these are natural rhythms that existed in the nervous system. We have to remember what the dopaminergic system is there for. I'll say it again, I wasn't consulted at the design phase, but we know as a generic form of motivation and pursuit, you can imagine the human or the animal that's hungry or thirsty. It needs energy to go pursue the thing. So the idea that you have to eat in order to get energy, that's true, but you need energy in order to get the thing to eat. So our nervous system has energy also, that's dopamine and epinephrine. Yes, we use glucose and glycogen, et cetera, when we're pursuing things, but the idea here is you're pursuing something, and then either by smell or by sight, you think you're on the right track. So you go down that track, and then, there it is. You get some berries, or you get, let's get prehistoric about this, or you get to kill the prey and eat it, and then it gives you energy to continue this pursuit or to reproduce. I mean, there's a reason why humans and other animals seek out reproduction, is that every species, but certainly humans, have two innate desires built into them. Whether or not they decide to actualize this or not is the desire to protect young and make more of its own species. Every successful species does that. Even if people don't have children, in general, people care about children because of what they represent. Very few people dislike children. I mean, there are a few mutants out there that dislike children, but you always worry about those kinds of people.
What's up?
That's very true. I kind of changed it up there at the end. They kind of started going and talking about something different. But I mean, I put it in, layman's terms, essentially, like, for a lot of these guys, getting off on porn, and the way that dopamine in the pathway loop ends up playing out to them the same way you would if you were to literally hunt your kill and prey it. And they're speaking in terms of like how potent the dopamine release is for, things like orgasms and pornography, which speaks to the power of them and why I think that it just needs to be removed entirely. Now, this ends on a good note, because it's not just all bad talking about pornography, because it's already happening. The porn ban has been commenced. There are a few states that have been taking place in this. Make sure I can open this up. Man, I clicked like 10 times. Let me clear some of these tabs out first. This is from Mario Nafal. Now, I saw Nick Sortor's point to this earlier in the day, but I think this one covers a bit more. Now, let me make sure I can make this so you guys can read this. Maybe I can change it a little bit. That's about okay. So it says right here, Pornhub blocks more states due to age verification laws. Now, if you're unaware, let me go down to this one that he quoted here. It started in Kentucky. So Pornhub has been blocking access in Kentucky because there's a new law that is requiring them to comply with age verification. And so I think Kentucky has now made it that any site that has mature materials or anything that could be deemed as 18 plus must have some kind of age verification process attached to the website. Otherwise, it will not allow the transaction to take place. Joining Kentucky, he says, and this is now totaling 18 million Americans who will be losing access to Pornhub at least. It's Kentucky, Indiana, Idaho, Kansas, and Nebraska will all be losing access to Pornhub. And I believe it's because all of these state governments made similar laws or parallel laws to what was implemented in Kentucky and are following suit. Now, this also says here, the laws will now require proof of age via government-issued ID to access certain sites. So it's not even what most sites do, which is just like a little simple check. You can just press a button. I mean, back in the day, it was a bit more. Back in the day, a lot of websites, you would have to actually put your birth date in, but it wouldn't even tell you what it was for. And so it would get a lot of kids who would just be like, oh, my birthday is this day. And you'd click yes. And it'd be like, you can't go to this website. And because it knew if it was put like, to verify your age, a lot of kids would just lie. And so clearly since then, we've gotten a bit more lax than where we were then. But obviously some states are changing that now. But requiring proof of age via government-issued ID. So I'm assuming that means the age verification process now requires an actual digital upload of an ID before you are allowed access. I think that's great. That's a huge, huge thing that can put a barrier in between kids being able to access pornography. Now, it's clearly not an outright ban at all because adults would still have access to it, but it does put a large legal barrier in place of preventing kids from being able to have access to it. Now, Pornhub continues here. Pornhub's arguing that these measures are ineffective, haphazard, and dangerous, posing privacy risks. Now, I'm not sure how you could get privacy risks, and maybe they're just arguing by proxy of the fact that you're uploading a government-issued ID, like private information, like your address and things of that nature. They could have an argument there based on the fact I've not seen the way that the back end is set up on this, and they could be entirely correct in the fact that it's not a secure government system. People are subject to having their data exposed or in data leaks and such. But again, it's probably not true. And that's, again, Pornhub has to argue this, right? Like, this is their business that's going to be hampered heavily. So they're going to make it any argument they can, right? Like, that's obviously in their best interest to fight for their business. So I take that with a grain of salt. Like, I don't think that these arguments have much merit because it's Pornhub just not wanting to lose 18 million Americans or access to 18 million Americans. And even with that too, that begs the question of why are they so keen on ensuring that under 18-year-olds have access, right? I don't think if Pornhub was like a great company, they'd be like, yeah, only 18-year-olds are allowed on porn. That's the law, right? No, dude, they're out here saying, actually, it's haphazard, it's ineffective, and it's dangerous. Like, come on, man. I don't think anyone's buying that. But it's like I was saying here, Texas, North Carolina, Montana, Mississippi, Virginia, Arkansas, and Utah were previously blocked for similar reasons. The Free Speech Coalition, Allison Bowden, that's a hard name to say because it looks like Biden Bodern, I don't know. It says right here, states are attempting to do an end run around the First Amendment by outsourcing censorship to citizens. Source, the Daily Mail. Now, I think that the movement or the train has left the station on this. This is what I said in one of the previous episodes. Can't remember which number exactly, but I think this is going to be here to stay. I think that this is going to be what happens. I think you're going to end up having some states that are going to be completely free and alive with it, like namely Colorado and, California and Hawaii and some of those very, very Democrat fortress areas, right? It's going to be impossible to get grassroots efforts to ban porn in heavily liberal areas, right? I don't expect it to happen, but it does shine a light in the fact that some states have now taken measures to go against it, right? So there will be some states where it is possible to be in a porn safe haven. Now, again, to think of what level we can get this to, because again, This is just an 18 plus age verification. It's not banning porn outright. That's still steps away. There will be a lot more riveting discussion to be had and hashed out in Congress and amongst, political pundits. I think before the conversation will move to the point at which they are actively legislating a ban, umbrella ban over pornography, period. I think we're a bit away from that, but I think the writing is on the wall here that some states are much closer to that than others, namely Kentucky. And I believe Oklahoma is another one that's not listed here, but also has been making huge steps to combat the porndemic as it is as well. And props to these states. I think it needs to continue. I think pornography is outright probably the most pervasive addiction that we have, that exists even currently in this weird times when they're alone, but there's still very physical and obvious signs you can catch if you catch them in the moment. Now with porn, it literally is very impossible to know that someone's addicted to it without literally catching them in the act. And even then, how are you to know that it is a repetitive instance or that they have done it continually? I think that's one of those things where it's very difficult to know. I apologize. It looks like I disconnected for a bit. Hopefully I'm still okay here. Looks like I'm okay, so I'll keep going. Now, one of the attachments to this, though, is I don't think until you actually can centralize Christian ethics into the mainframe of what the new right is, I still think pornography is going to take a back seat. I think too many people are willing to use it to their advantage in the current generation we're in right now to get a good push on it today. But again, all of these things to move this country back into an America First position will require a lot of time. You can't change culture overnight, not without, huge and insane kind of events that kind of, shock people, in which we don't need that. We don't want mass fallout or mass chaos. So again, take with a grain of salt. These things will take a lot of time to occur and to be done and to be done right. So with that, I'm going to move on to one of the next sections here, which is going to kind of wrap us up here. I didn't realize I was going as long as I was. And we'll start here with this one, actually, with this Myron Gaines. Now, Myron Gaines laid down the gauntlet in defense of Nick Fuentes. Let me put this on screen now. This is Myron Gaines challenging Tariq Nasheed, who is a self-called foundational Black American or whatever. And I guess and this is news to me too. I'm just finding out about this, where I guess foundational Black Americans make this distinction that all other Black people who don't have a specific ancestry to, I think, to enslaved Blacks, they don't view them as being as Black as they are. It's kind of like this, it's this weird racism inner tribe kind of dichotomy that I don't even know. It's just insane to me, but I've recently learned about this. Let me move this. I'm hiding it. But if you go to his page right here, you can see it. #FBA. It's like this this group that I guess is pushing a lot of Democrat policy in the minority wing of Democrats, which is namely Black. But Myron Gaines, the host of Fresh and Fit, saying the people in Andrew, which again, Andrew is who we saw in the previous clip debating Dave Smith, saying, so I'll kick it off. He challenges Tariq Nasheed and a partner of his choosing to debate him and Andrew Wilson on the topic of white supremacy in America and the oppression of Blacks, allegedly. Time to put this to bed once and for all. Now, I thought I bookmarked a different one from Myron, so now I'm actually a little disappointed, because I've been going back and forth quite a bit today. Now, this is also what Andrew Wilson said, saying Tariq is one of the worst low-tier race hustlers in existence. He is also factually wrong on most of his unhinged talking points. Can't wait for this one. And like you saw, he handled Dave Smith, pretty honestly, right? They weren't yelling or anything, but it seemed like he was pretty calm and cool and collected. And I, again, encourage people to watch that debate if you haven't. I'm trying to find the longer tweet that he put out. Now, I'm very disappointed, because I thought I had it bookmarked, so I apologize, guys. Or maybe he actually just deleted it. because he was getting a lot of flack on it, which is essentially was Myron going at the FBA. Oh, it is this one. It's this one right here. So Myron, obviously being a dark-skinned individual, but also being from Northern Sudan, I think is where he's from, he gets the "you're not black enough" treatment, or you're a light skin kind of treatment from the black community, as well as also getting, you're an Arab from the white community. But again, I'll let him say it with his words as I read this. Myron Gaines, and again, I think it's great that we're going against, we're putting a magnifying glass to the black versus white dichotomy, the white supremacy, the black supremacy, all of this stuff. I think it's all important. And again, it's a hard segue from the banning porn, but I think it's culturally relevant that we see what some of the pundits that are rising in the waves, especially these who are aligned America first, like him and Sneeko, what their opinions are, because I think, again, like Donnybrook put to me, I think it's more powerful that a black man speak to the black community than it is a white man speak to the black community, right? I think for anyone, you would find it to be much more easily receptible for a black man to a black community than a white man to be, attacking the black culture to a black people or a black audience. So again, this is Myron Gaines. Why do black people say stupid shit like "you're not black, so you can't comment on black issues"? Your family is from Sudan, a poor African country, so your opinion doesn't matter. You're an Arab, so you aren't one of us. He says to this, firstly, Sudan is a country in North Africa and literally means land of the blacks in Arabic, dummy. Secondly, my parents came from Sudan and I was born here. I am the definition of African American, you FBA retards. But let's play this FBA game and assume I was not black and was Indian, white, Chinese, green, whatever, IDGIF. I don't give a fuck. FBA logic is, you can't criticize us unless you are a foundational black American because you don't understand our struggle. He says, that's the stupidest rebuttal to criticism I ever heard. Forgive me. All foundational black Americans do is complain about white supremacy. By your logic, you can't comment on the white experiences because you're not white. By your logic, you can't comment on anything except black issues. See how flawed your logic is? That's like saying you have to be a mathematician to say 1 + 1 = 2. The beauty about the truth is it's objective, which means it stands on its own regardless of who says it. Now that I proved foundational black American logic is retarded, let me cook you morons with facts and play the same stupid victim game you do. Not only did I grow up with the same negative stereotypes and profiling foundational blacks get in America, I also received the Arab and Muslim hostility post 9/11 too. Guess what? When white cops, store tellers, and others saw me, they didn't see, well, gee, he's not an FBA, so let me stop profiling him. The very white supremacists you cry about, they put me in the same boat as you FBAs. Add terrorist for an extra measure of racism, since I'm Arab and Muslim as well. I feel for that, actually. You can scream, I'm not one of you until your face turns blue, but to the oppressors, I am. I deal with the same racist bullshit you guys do in America and then some. I got the 2-for-1 racism special and can claim the victim card 2 times as hard as these pussy foundational black Americans. Forgive me for the French, but I'm just reading what he's saying. But there's one big difference between me and you foundational blacks. I refuse to complain about a system that millions all over the world are dying to get a chance at. Why do you think we have thousands illegally crossing the border daily at the risk of being kidnapped, killed, extorted, or left for dead in the desert by Mexican cartels? Why do you think people spend every dollar they have to come here? They die and sacrifice for the very liberties you bitch about every day, you ungrateful Fs. You can talk S about black immigrants all you want, but that's why they out-earn foundational blacks and don't complain while doing it. Call me non-black all you want. I give 0 fucks. Facts are facts. To be honest, I'm ashamed we both check the same African-American box in questionnaires and I have to be lumped in with you crybabies. No one is keeping blacks from success but blacks themselves. Cry more and make more excuses for mediocrity. Powerful, dude. I read that and I was like, I never would expect that Myron was going to take such a inner tribe stance against in the name of objective truth. Now, I think that there's some disagreements I would have with Myron Gaines, especially when it comes to the Fresh Fit podcast and what he puts his morals in and what he prescribes as solutions to a lot of the degeneracy that we do see today. But again, I think he does have a lot of, again, pragmatic sense and intellect that comes from him. And I think this is a good stance to take, especially when it comes to the Black culture. I far be it from me to be someone who's going to sit here on a pedestal and be like, hey, this Black culture, this Black culture, whatever, because it just makes you a target. Not to say like I'm scared or terrified. I'm not going to say anything. I say stuff all the time. But to make it a point of like, it's not receptive when I say it. And like, nobody hears anything but me saying, the N word over and over again. But I could be going like, you guys need to do this. You guys need to do this. And they're like, what is he calling us? It's good. And I'm glad that this is happening. I've seen a lot more of it here recently. It seems like almost all of these aspects, whether it's porn, whether it's Israel influence, whether it's Christianity as a whole, whether it's Black culture issues, it seems like we are getting a lot louder in terms of the minority voices that are saying, we are tired of this. This stuff has to stop. And good on them for it, man. I truly am. I'm tired of seeing pregnant Black women like twerking on the street. I'll be honest, I live in the city. I see that way too often. I don't really see any white pregnant women twerking on the street, and maybe that happens. But for me, the anecdotal evidence is the opposite. I think there's a lot of brokenness in that culture. I think there is a lot of reasons for it that are not their own for why they are so broken. There are definitely a lot of hands that were played, a lot of thumbs that were put on the scale. But again, I don't think that's any excuse to be a perpetual victim for the rest of your life, especially as Myron put it there. Not at the cost of everyone else having to sacrifice for you to be ungrateful. This is a good way to put it. And then even here, the top comment, which y'all put it up on screen, and maybe scroll my thing a little bit, is Mr. Tommy Sotomayor saying they got it from their mama. She told them to gatekeep anything that's not a compliment. And if you don't know Mr. Tommy Sotomayor, he is one of the people who gets banned almost everywhere. He has a popular video that he's called an Uncle Tom for because he makes a very, very harsh argument against Black culture and against the current mindset of the average Black American. Again, I think he's somebody who's worth following. I don't follow him. Somebody do that, correct that right now. But I think it's somebody who you should look towards as having a very, very good perspective of the Black community, especially for him being a Black man himself. Another good one was Kevin Samuels. Now, he's stuck in the gender war aspect of it in terms of dating. R.I.P. Kevin Samuels. And again, someone who I probably had some kind of slight disagreements with, but he was also deemed to be this arrogant and Uncle Tom type figure simply because he was a Black man telling Black people to do better. Now, again, all of this ties in together with the fact of expect there to be a debate or probably maybe not, seeing how a lot of these people kind of back out. Leftists hate debating. They hate going and making their arguments public or being seen on camera in these kinds of light. But again, a nod to this and kind of look forward to it as well. There would possibly be a debate with Myron and Andrew Wilson on the same team, which was a duo I never expected. Andrew Wilson and Myron Gaines on the same squad. I believe Myron is Muslim and obviously Andrew Wilson is Christian. But again, that alliance is definitely stronger than the other ones. And to move off of this, there was a smaller video that I think exemplifies this a bit further, right? Now, this is a Black man's point of view between liberals and conservatives. Now, I'm not sure who this person is. I know that he is a TikTok influencer. He makes a lot of videos like this in the same light, so people probably already deemed this man to be an Uncle Tom. I think his name is John Dawson, right? Let's see this. Yeah, John Dawson. He's only got like 4,000 some followers here, but I think it's because his primary is TikTok. Now, it's 2.5 minutes long, but he gives the more Hodge Twins-esque kind of viewpoint on how white people act between the parties and what his kind of mindset is when he notices these differences in behavior and what he appreciates about them differently or not at all. And again, the volume, if any issues, please let me know. I will change accordingly.
This is the difference between a white liberal and a white conservative in the eyes of a Black man, okay? Now, I lived in California, I've lived in Texas, I've lived in really red, I've lived in really blue, okay? Here's what the liberals will do when they see a young, articulate, successful Black man. They'll be like, oh my gosh, it must have been so hard for you to overcome the disparities, the discrimination, the racism. It is just so amazing that you've become the exception to the rule. You have just created something for yourself that is just so difficult for minorities to do. and we're just so proud of you. So
a
amazing.
great exit for this.
And I'm sitting there being like, so like what? You just think all black people are just dumb thugs that don't know how to do nothing? I'm the exception to the rule purely because I found success like you have. Like I'm as successful as you, so therefore I must just be a special one. The exception to the rule.
It's like, for real, like, are you seriously talking to me like that right now? Is that what you think of me?
Crazy. I'm not joking. This happens. It's crazy. They're like, oh my gosh, like the struggles, the hurdles, the obstacles. It's just amazing that you found the way to be moderately successful. And it's the most racist, like, in-person experience that I usually get. And it's just like the assumption that I'm just like part of a group of people that are incapable, period. Here's how white conservatives do it. They'll see a young black man, articulate, successful, and they'll be like, word, dude, congrats,
good job, brother.
man, pulled yourself up by your bootstraps. That's cool, bro, keep it going. And then they leave. They leave. Because they don't care. Conservative, they don't care. It's like, oh, you worked hard? You want a cookie? You want a cookie for working hard? And they don't care. They're like, dude, are you kidding me?
It's the expectation, man. It's just like, oh, so you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. All right, man, good for you, dog. See you tomorrow.
I'll congratulate you for just being a hard worker, but like, I'm not gonna sit here and, you know, sing in the arms of an angel. There's a black man trying to make money. It's like ridiculous. So I love conservatives for that. Like, hey, word, dude. Good job, man. Keep it going. And they walk off. Liberals gotta freaking sing me a song. Tap dance.
They give like a preamble. They're like, you know, like from the 1800s, we know how hard it might. Like, it's
a little
crazy,
bit.
dude.
Get on their knees and kiss my big toe. Apologize for their whiteness and tell me that I'm the exception to the rule because all black people are stupid. And it's just like, damn, liberals, y'all really are so ignorant and you can't see your ignorance. It's painful. I genuinely, I'd rather be ignored than praised for my disabilities. Fake disabilities, by the way. Anyway, that's all I was trying to say. This is...
That's good, right? But these conversations weren't even happening not too long ago. Like before, you know, you would even attempt to make half these conversations about like, well, like, you know, a lot of black people just act like victims. You'd have your front page location, prime real estate, New York Times, racist. I think it's a good thing. I don't think that there's any way to improve culture without having grassroots efforts among the people who actually exist in that culture to speak back into their audience and say, hey, we've got to start doing something different. We got to change, or, you know, we're just not victims, you know. And I think no amount of any kind of white person being halfway frustrated and trying to get black people to listen to them is going to be nearly as effective as a respected and successful black man saying, hey, no, like, you guys listen. I just think it's a lot more receptive. I could be wrong on that, but again, I find it to be just one of those basic truths of life, you know, in the way that would work. But to move from here, one of the final things I want to talk about, and it'll be a harder segue too, is I just titled this thing, I Cannot Stand Lauren Southern. And it's a bit of a smaller note, but I think, again, it's got relevancy here. Now, switch back as well. It's a screenshot here of a couple comments on a YouTube video, because apparently Ashley St. Clair did a episode or an interview with the Trigonometry group. Now I'll go ahead and read this from Lauren Southern. Forgive me. I actually don't understand the response to St. Clair Ashley's trigonometry episode. Do people have serious comprehension issues? She never demanded YouTube censor anyone. She pointed to a fascinating fact that YouTube have been on the forefront of censorship for every other subject, LGBT, immigration, vaccines, etc. But for some reason, they just became completely asleep at the wheel on content promoting hatred between the sexes. Let me stop you right there. Feminism? No, I wouldn't. She wouldn't quite possibly sit there and deem feminism as being some kind of content that promotes hatred between the sexes. No. It's the red pill. It's these reactionary guys, grassroots, who are making channels amongst themselves with no mainstream backing, fighting against the powers that be in a feminist world, in a world that is entirely anti-male, anti-masculine male, I should say. And Lauren Southern's making a call for them to, why weren't they? I mean, come on, dude, don't play stupid with me. The obvious implication of her bringing up the fact that LGBTQ immigration, vaccines, and all these were censored, but red pill content was left fine. The implication there is that why was this not also censored? Which would imply that Ashley St. Clair would see a reason for it to be censored. And again, she doesn't even point out, Lauren Southern doesn't even say red pill content. She says content promoting hatred between the sexes. Really? These are your free speech advocates, dude? I thought these people said hate speech wasn't real. But no. It all changes when it comes to between the genders, right? No. I quite honestly, I think the framework's wrong, dude. But for some reason, they just became completely asleep at the wheel on feminism content that promotes hatred against men. She didn't say that. She won't say that. She never will say that. And again, she's somebody who has a questionable personal life, questionable private life, and accidentally married a federal agent or unknowingly married a federal agent. Posts selfie pictures all the time, clearly plays on the aspect of using her facial beauty or her beauty in general, her sex appeal, to further build her audience. Now, I guess you could say I do the same when I put myself in thumbnails and stuff, but I think it's a little bit different for men. I think that me just taking a picture of me doing like something like this with my hands up is a bit different than taking a specifically photo aimed, soul focused image of your face. And that's an aside point here. But she also goes on to say, content pushing straight women and men apart. Again, feminism? No. She's talking about the red pill. Content pushing young men away from having families. Feminism? No. She's talking about red pill content. Does no one find this odd? Hello? I'll tell you what I do find odd is that you will sit here and scream that you were the most conservative girl out here. You're a conservative ally. You're a pundit in the conservative force. And you are sitting here kind of halfway paper-handedly playing with like, well, why wasn't it like, red pill content's hateful towards, censor, you could censor it. Why this other stuff wasn't censored? Like, we hear what you're saying, dude. But this comment here on this, right? This is the comment. Oh, that's not the top one. It's this one right here. It says, disappointed with Kissin and Francis that they would not push back when she said she wants YouTube to ban the red pill, as they are pro-free speech, especially when misandry is completely the norm in mainstream TV, movies, colleges, and Hollywood. 145 likes. And she says she doesn't understand the response to and I'm not shocked. I'm not surprised. Why would a feminist who cannot even sniff the potent odor of feminism that is wrapped around herself like a cloak, like a warm blanket, dude. Why would I expect her to see anything differently, dude? And it's just, I mean, I find it, I look at these men, who are even in my comments all the time, who disagree with the stances that I take with the Christville, because they're so turned away by the thought of marriage. They're so turned away by the fact that most women they would ever get a chance to be with ever has already been, violated or been with another man, that they were always going to be claiming some kind of other half-used trophy. And not to say that that's how you should view women. I'm just saying, I'm speaking like this is how men think. And if people hate it, dude, they hate it. They're like, how dare you say that? And it's like, dude, this is how men think, bro. Like, why don't you calm down? And again, but they say that, and they have the audacity and the confidence to say that because, exactly as that comment said, misandry is the norm, dude. It's okay. You can say whatever you want to men. You can, half of the time, you can literally sexually assault a man, dude, and nothing will happen to you. As a woman to a man, I mean, if a man tries to do it to a man, generally that gets caught. But it's if a woman does it to a man, it's like, whoa, she's just playing around, dude. But for some reason, they just became completely asleep at the wheel. I tell you what, dude, I think what the better way to say this, with not even anything there's to say about her, conservatives became asleep at the wheel when feminism ripped apart and became the religion of this country. That's what really happened. Here, let me do this. Let me do you a favor, dude. I bet you I'm going to go here, and within 4 posts, we'll limit it to this. Within 4 posts, I will see a picture of her or her body on this platform. Okay, that one's not bad. Okay, that's a repost. Looking for her post. Okay, that's a pinned post. I'll count that as one. We got 3 left. That's a repost. That's a repost. That's a repost. Oh, it's a repost of herself, right? Good one. Right here. Boom. Look at this. Look at this. Look at this. Now, surely, like, right, she can do that. You see what I mean? And I'm not sitting here being like, women shouldn't be taking photos, right? Like, how dare a woman take a photo of herself? But who is this for? What is the performative gesture of, like, you know, the positioning, right? It's clearly to make herself look better. It's clearly her playing on her own sexual appeal, her beauty appeal to sell more product. Now, that product may be literally a view, right? Like, she's trying to sell views. She wants you to click on her video. She wants you to give her your attention, right? That's the point of it. This is, and there's multiple issues working here, right? But the main one is the fact that feminism is so ingrained in our culture that the girls who are in the conservative movement can't see it. They use it every single day. They take advantage of it all the time, whether they are ignorant to this fact or they are maliciously abusing it to their advantage. I do not know. I can only speculate. But to sit there and go, man, these guys who started these random YouTube channels, who get persecuted from every institution, from all of mass media, Andrew Tate, Alex Jones, all of these guys who speak Fresh and Fit, the whatever podcast, gets demonized, smeared all the time, nonstop in media, everywhere, dude. Oh, they cherry pick their girls. That's not indicative of how girls looked. Oh, Andrew Tate did all this human trafficking. No, that wasn't real, dude. He was held in prison for all these reasons that no one even knows. Go down the list, dude. Fresh and Fit, they're demonetized. Their YouTube has to battle demonetization all the time. They have to go through sponsors in a different way. The whatever podcast, the same thing. What do you mean, dude? There already is an active nonstop pressure cooker that is against anything, any male who dares to stand up and say, I want to be a masculine man. I don't want to be surrounded by this gay feminist bullshit anymore. There's a target on your back. I can't think of how much more delusional you have to be to sit there and think we need to target and censor these grassroots small channels over the large umbrella, heavy-handed feminism that exists in every institution, that exists across every school board, that exists all places. It's omnipresent, dude, in this country. This is what I mean by, like, feminism is bad, first and foremost, but I'm done with female conservative pundits, dude. They cannot carry the burden. They are not leaders. They cannot carry the torch. They cannot carry the water for the men. If you wish to escape from this hellhole that is nonstop feminism subverting everything that is good to the conservative movement, everything that could be possibly Christian, you have to sit there and go, hey, women got to get out. If you're unwilling to be a little mean because you want to save your country, man, then you can sit there, dude, and watch it all burn away, dude. You can sit there in frustration and watch these girls sit there and go, what do you mean? What do you mean, Miss Sandry? That never happens. That's a life you will set for yourself if you refuse to take a stance. I find it to be an out of bounds delusion. Out of bounds delusion. You go back to this again one more time, man. Completely asleep at the wheel on content promoting hate between the sexes, and then sit there and pretend that feminism isn't the rampant, degenerate, disgusting, demonic tool that it is, how it sits in this country today. And I think I'll end it right there. Three big things, right? Ban porn. Ban porn. Let's help support those in the Black community who are willing to take on the brunt of all of that racism, the Uncle Tom foolery. And let's take another step at getting rid of feminism. I am somebody who used to be a huge fan of Lauren Southern, dude, especially when it came to the racial politic aspects of it, where she was one of the first ones to say, it's okay to be white, and she was getting demonetized and all this. And I'm like, dude, that's sick. It's a base girl, like, taking all these stances. And look at where we are right now. And it sucks too, because I said this a while ago, I think people underestimated the power of simp armies until it was too late. And now all of the guys who try to take stances will be literally mogged and choked out by all of the white knights coming in to be like, oh, you just hate women. You have porn brain. Anything, dude. And so most guys are just like, all right, deuces, dude. Fade out. Like, I'm not putting up with this, dude. You're telling me like I have to do all of this. And then if I do get a girl, she's going to have all these problems, be psychotic, never be satisfied. I have to worry about hypergamy, and I'll be the 8th guy that's actually had sex with her. Dude, it ain't a surprise to me, dude. It ain't a surprise to me. But I'll leave it there. The one final thing I did want to say is if you didn't catch in the beginning, please pray for my little brother. I'm dealing with probably the most significant issue in my personal family I've ever had to experience in my lifetime. I've been out of sorts. I feel a little broken inside, to be honest. I'm actually kind of proud of myself for making it this far. Again, please pray for my little brother, and please pray for my parents. They need it a lot. Pray for their well-being, their mental well-being, and please pray for my brother's safety. And I think I'll leave it at that. I appreciate you guys very much. I know I didn't get to the 2-hour mark, but I did keep a group of viewers, and I also appreciate Wayne being in here and chatting. I know if you might recognize Wayne Harris, I've actually interviewed him on the podcast a few times, but I'll leave it there. Just saying that's making me think about my brother again, and I don't want to break down on air because I don't want to look like an idiot. Not that crying's for idiots, but I just don't want to make a fool of myself. Appreciate you guys very much. Take care. Christ is King. Look forward to another episode being aired this weekend if I get more time. But again, regarding my brother's situation, I may have to take a short break for a week or so because it'll probably end up being out of state. I don't know. I'm not sure yet. So I'll try to keep you posted as much as I can. I'll also try to get in a good rhythm of always posting when I'm going to go live. I've been trying to do that on YouTube, so I'll try to post in the morning if I know I will be streaming that day, so there's more people who are tuned into it as well. But again, appreciate you all. Appreciate everybody for chatting in, coming in, commenting. Like, subscribe, share the show. Peace out. Have a good rest of your day. Christ is King.